and another discussion. It's me, Judah McNeil, and I'm here with Ford Suze, and we're also joined again by Jared Putnam. How you doing, guys?
I was waiting for him. He's waiting for me. This interminable pause.
Take initiative, folks. All right.
Doing well.
Doing well.
That's actually a lie. This has been a horrible week, but
yeah, it hadn't been that great.
It's fine.
Yeah, I haven't had a great. Oh, Ford, I'm going to kill you.
What?
I don't know. I just thought I'd say something like that would get you more like riled up. Last podcast, you were like only half alive.
Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, I've been like in a fog. I don't know. It's been a fog for a while now. So
what can I say? I totally botched that. What can I say to get you riled up? Like,
I don't know. I don't want to think about it because
I think we got. I listened to that. Reverse redaction, and I think we got like 3 Ford impressions in a row, like where he was making fun of people in the nasally voice.
Oh, right.
My favorite.
Okay. I find it tremendously entertaining.
Yeah, I love the voices. I live for the voices. I'm just here for the voices. So today we are going to reverse redact Westworld. Now, Westworld I've been staying away from because it's a pretty vile show. Let's be honest. It's it's a HBO show, has tons of great actors, and it's pretty much Jonathan Nolan mind creation, right? Jonathan Nolan and Joy, what's her name? Jonathan Nolan and Lisa Joy creation. And go ahead. What were you saying?
Well, it all comes from Michael Crichton originally, the original Westworld.
Really? So it's a book? I had no idea.
Apparently it was a TV series. I didn't really know. Wait, main article.
No, it was a movie originally. Or there was a movie. I don't know if that was the original thing.
Okay, I think you're right. So Crichton actually directed it in 1973, the movie with Yul Brynner, and which I'd seen, and so I just thought it was like some cheesy thing. And then they did a TV show. Is that right?
I don't remember. They may have. I don't remember the TV show prior to this one.
There's a short-lived television series. Okay, that's it. So Westworld film in 73, then they did Future World film in 76, and then they did a TV series in 80. So yeah, I guess it has something to do. And you're right. Jonathan Nolan and Lisa Joy have helmed this one.
So it's basically a world of androids that are so lifelike. People go there to experience their deepest, darkest, most adventurous fantasies in real life, killing people at will, having copulous engagement, pleasurable engagement with whoever they like, and basically living out this like these Western storylines, rich people living out Western storylines, and it gets crazy.
Yeah, it's basically like Red Dead Redemption meets Disneyland, pretty much.
That's a pretty good analysis.
In real life. Yeah.
Yes. Now, so just to start off, guys, what would you, stars wise, out of 5 stars, what would you give this show? And can you break it down? Like, what did you like most and least about it? It's spoiler free to start off.
I'll go first.
You go first.
I'll go first. Yeah, I haven't rewatched the whole series. We only got to watch the last episode of season 1 the other night, and I would say 4 out of 5, maybe 4.5 out of 5 for in terms of what it's trying to do. I found it entertaining. I was actually pleasantly surprised. I wasn't really going into it that interested. It was just something to kill time while we waited for Game of Thrones. And yeah, I walked out of it very pleased. The last episode for me made it all worth it. And there were just lots of little moments they made you think about computer programming, artificial intelligence, human free will versus determinism, all kinds of interesting things like that. So yeah, I liked it. I thought it's up there for me with Game of Thrones in terms of like the goals it's trying to fulfill. So I liked it a lot, and just going back and watching that last episode again confirmed it for me. It made me think about some things I hadn't really thought about in a long time. So in terms of, especially with AI and human consciousness, and it's got that Matrix sort of thing, getting you to think about what it means to be self-aware and autonomous. So
getting you to think about reality, right?
Yeah, getting then the nature of reality and what it means to wake up. And so yeah, I think it's like, I don't know. I think it's easy. I don't know. I'm kind of like on this line where it's like, it's easy to dismiss something that's entertaining, that it's not actually breaking new ground. But in terms of mainstream entertainment, I think they got some interesting thoughts about human consciousness and waking up and questioning the world around you, those kind of things. So yeah, I liked it a lot. It worked. It worked well for me. So I'm definitely a fan of season 1. We'll see what happens with season 2.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like, I try not to be too critical of it when I think about all the garbage that's on television. But at the same time, yeah, like in terms of what Ford's saying, for what they're trying to do, five stars for me.
Right.
Love the concept. Could watch this stuff just all the time. I think the problem for me is we have seen a lot of stuff, not maybe quite as focused the way this is, but I mean, just in terms of the whole storyline of what it means for artificial intelligence to achieve consciousness. We've seen these things explored in Battlestar Galactica, Terminator, The Matrix, Blade Runner, Ex Machina. So I mean, I think with me, I'm going to, of course, keep watching, and I like the show, but I'm probably going to be disappointed if it doesn't deliver something that we haven't seen already. Like I need something different from what we've seen already. And, I think one of the things that's hard for me to invest in with the show is, one, it doesn't feel like, and hopefully these aren't really like spoilers, I don't think. I mean, I'm not getting into any specific stuff, just kind of like what happens in the show with them being androids and being able to repair and reprogram. In some ways, it feels like there's not really stakes to the show, because you see characters that just get brought back over and over. And the other thing that I'm starting to worry about is they jump around so much with the story. Some shows have done this to great effect. Lost did this. Put the last season of Lost aside, but in terms of Lost jumping around, I never felt like they were doing it to hide bad storytelling.
Okay, yeah.
And I've seen other shows, The Walking Dead, which I should have stopped watching a long time ago, but there's nothing else on at the time The Walking Dead runs. But they've gotten in the habit this past season especially, of just jumping around, and it's very clearly to just hide mediocre and bad storytelling. And Westworld doesn't have bad storytelling, but I'm wondering if they're starting to use this, or well, not starting. They've been doing it since the start, but I'm wondering if they're using this to disguise sort of just okay storytelling. So I sound really critical of it, I know, and I like it more than probably what I came off sounding like that. But I really, I guess, just want to see something unique and different delivered out of this.
I agree with you guys. I'd probably give it. See, it's hard. I waver between a 5 and a 2 somewhere.
Yeah.
Like
Right.
Part of me hated it, part of me loved it, and I think that's why I kind of want to break it down based on like the acting was pretty good, the story is very interesting, but I think what really got me was I have to say that the gratuitous sex, nudity, and violence like it adds. I just wonder what it would have been like if they had done it sort of if they had done it Breaking Bad style. We're not, alluding to a lot of heavy things without showing it.
Yeah, I think it's almost like a what do you call it, a part of the 5 pillars of HBO. In order to have, you have to have gratuitous TNA. It's like the investors expect it. So I mean, it's almost it's almost kind of comical that the show comments on that, but they have their cake and eat it too, because it's HBO and you have to do that. And if you're right, if it had been a Breaking Bad situation, they could have done it. I don't know. They could have handled it in a different way. Like watching Ready Player One. And the way he'll acknowledges some people go to this planet, what happens there. Like he doesn't have to dwell on it. But this show lives in that nonstop. And so, yeah, I do agree. I think it is more gratuitous than Game of Thrones in terms of maybe not the violence, but definitely with the sex and nudity. It's just it's throwing it in your face nonstop. Which there's a commentary there. I think they are trying to make a point, but I do see what you're saying.
And at a certain point, it does become, like at a certain point, like I forget, I don't even need to look away. I forget that you get so caught up in the story that like it's like a Barbie doll, or it's like a Ken doll, like it's just a thing. There's something about it and that kind of is a commentary that there's something about that sort of, I'm like, well,
and I think that is actually kind of proves their point in a way. I don't know. In some ways, they do a good job because when they walk into the naked room, and it's just normal looking people. Like these are not like sex goddesses and gods. They're pretty frumpy and all shapes and sizes. So, in a way, it does kind of get, like you said, it kind of gets. You see the clinical side of it. Yeah, you see the clinical side of it. It's almost like medical in some ways. So, I mean, I don't have a problem with that so much, but I do think sometimes they are definitely ratcheting it up. I don't know. I've thought about this as coming from a more conservative moral background, like in my art, like how far would I go in writing, and sometimes you just wonder, like, can you really communicate it without being explicit? Is there a more artful way to do it? And these are interesting questions to kind of mull over. But yeah, sometimes a moral response to a piece of art is not always, kind of overlooks what the intent of the work is. And so in a lot of ways, I think some of this gratuitousness is really a commentary on human nature. It's not necessarily them trying to have their cake and eat it too. So that's my non-answer. I've gone like full circle there.
Well, see, I actually kind of, I guess I disagree a little bit, because I mean, having seen several HBO shows now, all the others, well, not just HBO, Showtime too, both of them, I felt like it was gratuitous, and all the others. This is the one where I'm like willing to forgive it, just because of the commentary on the fact that this is a place where people go to specifically do all these things to cater to their, base desires. So I'm much more forgiving of it in this one than I am really in other HBO or Showtime shows.
Gotcha.
But I think the thing that I love most about the show is, I'll say that I love most about the writing is just the way they draw me in with all the, what I call this, series of queries. It's just this like systematic, like one question after another that they answer just enough, and then they fool you just enough that you really don't know what's going on, and you want to know, desperately want to know what's going on. You got to get to the end to find out, and then at the end, finding out things that change your whole perspective. I think they did that brilliantly, but kind of to your point, Jared, is it's kind of a gimmicky thing that is hard to keep up over several seasons.
Yeah. I think part of the thing, I remember when the show was in development and they stopped production once because they were having issues with it. And then I think even when they started back, because it got delayed like a year. And even when they started back, like they were still writing scripts as they were going along in the season.
Well,
at least
scary.
That is scary. Yeah. And so just knowing little things like that kind of worries me about where it might go long term. And I could be completely wrong. They may have a great long term plan. If I remember right, I think they were going to kind of take a break in between, seasons 1 and 2 to kind of arc it out a little bit better over multiple seasons. So we'll see what we get, but right now I'm a little bit nervous with it.
Well, I think that gives a pretty good overview. I think we should go right into spoilers.
Sounds good.
Okay. So, spoiler alert for anybody that's listening or watching. Past this point, we are going to spoil the heck out of Westworld. What was the biggest surprise for you? Start with you, Ford.
So for me, I think the biggest surprise was in the last episode of season 1, the Anthony Hopkins kind of unraveling, what his plan has been all along. And I think it's just a pretty beautiful 20 or 30 minutes there when you see that whole thing unfold. It starts with the two main hosts, Cowboy Dude and
Teddy,
and
Dolores.
Yes, Dolores, our main character, on the beach, and it's almost soap opera level bad. You're just like, what is going on? What? Because we actually started it right there. I think when we were rewatching, like, man, I was just like tuning out. I was like, oh, that's right. This is him setting the stage for the next narrative, and everyone's on the beach clapping because they're watching them do this performance, and then they're literally like frozen. And everyone's like, oh, this is going to be great, and so he starts talking, and then you get to see, all this, he goes in and he talks to Dolores and shows the picture of God touching Adam's finger. And that whole, reveal of God being the human brain. And does it really look like that? Because God, Adam, Michelangelo.
I looked at it and I can see that. I don't know, maybe this
because I've never noticed it before, but it's like painfully obvious when you look at it in that. It's like that is the human brain on the right side. And so when, he's basically saying, what he alludes to it, and then later on she's saying, who have you been hearing speak? And it's been Jeffrey Wright's character. My mind's just
Bernard.
It's been Bernard, and then it's been Anthony Hopkins, and it's been Bernard the whole time. And then Bernard's voice changes, and she hears Anthony Hopkins, and then she hears her voice, and she's in that chair talking to herself. And that moment for me, I mean, that's like a blue pill, red pill in the Matrix sort of moment. Like that, I've just been thinking about so much in terms of consciousness, how a lot of the decisions I've made in my life that I thought were my own autonomous decision were decisions made by a machine, a cultural machine. They were political, they were familial, they were cultural. They, most of them had a result of, some religious upbringing, and I was doing what I thought I wanted to do, but was really, I was hearing the voice of God, so to speak, but it wasn't the voice of God. It was the voice of the people, it was the voice of a certain preacher or something like that. And I think so many of us, really, if we were honest with ourselves, we'd realize there is another voice we're listening to. And all this time we thought it was us, but it's not even us. So that to me, I mean, that's up there for like on the level with Prometheus and some of these other, the Matrix, in terms of thinking about what does it mean to actually wake up? What does it mean to actually be autonomous, or to even be conscious in a way? Like, I think so much of the problems that I faced in my life is because I was under the illusion that I was making the decision, and it wasn't even a decision. It was actually just a programmed response. So it was worth the price of admission for that moment for me. And Anthony Hopkins freaking just destroys that. I mean, you know, he's Anthony Hopkins, but I mean, come on. I mean, the guy's like that old and he's just still hitting out of the park like that. I mean, you know, we can forgive him 1,000 more turns in Transformers if he wants to do it. I don't care. Like, he's earned his keep.
I forgot he was in Transformers.
The dude can do whatever he wants. Like, he's just such a legend. And you know, Rachel, what's her name, man?
Evan Woods.
Yeah, she does great. So yeah, I just think it's a masterful stroke. That whole and the other thing I like, Ramin Djawadi, the guy who does the Game of Thrones soundtrack. He also did the one here in Westworld. Some great
Evan Rachel Wood. I'm sorry, I got it wrong.
Yeah, but the soundtrack guy, he just does these great things with that, you know, the saloon piano organ thing. And
yes.
I love the Radiohead. So the fact that they use,
I thought you'd like that.
Yeah, Wake from Your Sleep, which is, you know, the ex music for Romeo and Juliet, the Leo version. But that little, it's I got a soft spot for Radiohead. I thought that was a perfect song to use, and in terms of building up to the climax there, and yeah, what a climax! And that whole thing of. Yeah, I think there's something that we, especially traditional religious people, we don't really appreciate just how violent maturity really is, and how violent coming to autonomy must really be. And, you know, often overlook the fact that Jacob in the Jewish Old Testament, the old, you know, the Jewish Bible story of him wrestling with God, you know, that there is a violent aspect to dealing with your creator. And it's not just this submissive sort of like, yes, master, I'm going to do what you tell me to do. And I am a robot and you will, there is this give and take. And in order for, if our creator actually wants us to stand up on our own 2 feet, it's going to be a kind of violent affair. So the fact that, again, that ties back to Prometheus. One of the things I love so much about that the creative act is a self-denying act, that the God must be willing to sacrifice himself in order for his children to be able to stand on their own 2 feet. So I don't know. There's a lot there, and I think they explore it pretty delicately and in an entertaining fashion too. And it's great seeing that look on Ed Harris's face when he actually gets shot. He's like, "Oh, it's happening."
So, what about you, Jared?
Yeah. Well, yeah, just to a couple of Ford's points there. Yeah, the soundtrack I loved. I actually downloaded. I didn't download the whole soundtrack, but I downloaded one song that I really liked. Actually, when I was doing some writing of a sci-fi script, it's called "Freeze All Motor Functions." It's the line that they deliver in the show over and over, and that's probably my favorite song from the soundtrack. And then to Anthony Hopkins, yeah, I mean, one of the reasons that I was really excited for the show was I knew, you know, Anthony Hopkins and Ed Harris were both going to be in it. And especially with Anthony Hopkins, I mean, I could sit there and listen to him read a grocery list, you know. So I really hope that he's not, you know, spoiler, since we're into spoilers, that he's not actually dead, or that maybe he has been dead and he created, you know, artificial versions of himself, and he can
kind of gunning for that we have an artificial version of him, but I'm not sure that we're gonna get it.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. Like it would depend on the show, because that man, just like we were saying, like he likes to work, you know. If he will go do Transformers, he will do anything. And he actually, going back to what we were saying about Breaking Bad and how it represents things in a more subtle way, he actually, I don't know if you guys know this, he actually wrote a letter to Bryan Cranston asking him to put him on the show. Like, he loved Breaking Bad so much, and he told Bryan Cranston that Breaking Bad was the best piece of television, film, anything that he had ever seen, and asked him if he would please put him on the show.
Was he ever on it?
No,
he wasn't. No, it would have been like, I don't think
it's hard to squeeze them in, just with their aesthetic and everything. But man, yeah, I mean, what a testament, though.
Right, right. I mean, imagine if you're Bryan Cranston and Anthony Hopkins is saying you're the best I've ever seen. So
right,
that's pretty crazy. But yeah, actually, to what I thought was the most surprising part of it, kind of to what Ford was saying. is a little bit similar with that, where at the end of the season last year, when you found out that, because they had been building it for so long, making it seem like Anthony Hopkins' character was kind of this stereotypical overlord suppressing the artificial intelligence. And then you find out at the very end that he had the same idea as Bernard, but he just had a different way. Like he had a different belief in terms of how it needed to happen. And I didn't get a chance to go back and watch the last episode again, but in what I remember from it, or from the last episode of the first season, but in what I remember from it, and just from reading some things to refresh myself, I think it was basically that Bernard felt like you could give the AI their freedom sort of as it was, and Hopkins felt like there had to be more suffering, like it had to be earned through more suffering. And that's something that I think I definitely would agree with and relate to, just in terms of the human experience, where it only makes you stronger. So that was the most surprising part for me. Some of the other twists during the season with the alternate timelines and stuff like that didn't really. I think I caught on to those pretty early. So that was, again, definitely the biggest surprise for me.
The timeline thing took me by surprise the most. It's interesting you say that. Like, first of all, I think the biggest problem I have with the show is I don't think William looks anything like. I don't think there's no connection between William and the black dressed man. Like, they have totally different faces, personalities, everything. Like, there is no continuity between the two. To have such a jarring, this is really William. Okay, just because you say so, I don't see anything that actually connects them.
Yeah, and that was the thing. Like, I remember going through it, like thinking about that and thinking, but are they the same? But they look nothing alike. But then you find out that clearly they've just done that to fool you, which seems like too cheap of a.
Okay, I can grant that. I liked it, but no, I grant that. That's a good. Yeah, they would need it. Yeah, okay, I grant that.
Well, see, like at one point, Ed Harris, the black-hatted man, older William, whatever, says when he goes into, or when he sees young Robert, he says they made him too small. And I wonder if at some point in the writing, Ed Harris was going to be Robert's brother, because remember, Robert had a brother. In that little house scene, and it kind of looked like Ed Harris way more than William, and is like, like you look at his face, he's got two big moles right here. William has two moles, and Ed Harris has like classically just kind of like wrinkly flat face. And so I don't know. I think I still don't know why he said they built him too small. When would William have seen Robert as a little boy?
Yeah, I don't remember that at all. I don't know.
They're out in the woods, and the little boy comes up to him.
Just in the premiere, in the season 2 premiere.
No. In the season 1, they're out in the woods. Okay. He's with that the Hispanic bandit guy, and the little boy comes up to him, and he goes, "They made him too small." And I'm like, and so that's what I thought. Oh, it's got to be Robert's brother, and but I don't know.
Well, I mean, apart from having different accents, like maybe they'll just throw that in there as a way of throwing you off too. But apart from having different accents, do we know that he for sure isn't his brother?
No, I guess you're right. I mean,
there would be no. I mean, that wouldn't make sense either if they grew up together and one of them has an accent and the other one doesn't. But still,
well, that could be explained away a lot more. I mean, I guess you could say he had surgery to remove the moles, but I mean, like brothers and siblings have different accents. That's like my brother has a Southern accent. I don't,
Yeah.
I don't know, but so that was a huge surprise and sort of a disappointment to me. Although I did love. So I loved going back with my mind through the different timelines with Dolores. Like because it didn't make sense to me. You guys are on top of it more than I am, because when her dad picks up the picture, you know, and then you see William with the picture later, I was like, well, how did that get old? You know, because and I should have known that it was different timelines, but that caught me off guard. So Ford hasn't seen the first episode this season.
I saw parts of it, and y'all feel free to spoil it. It's fine. We got about halfway through, but there was some weather trouble, and we were watching it live. We were at somebody's house, and then it recorded all the weather trouble. So all we have is like this static feed.
Hey, but at least you have that.
Yeah, so that's all I know. I saw Dolores being, you know, executioner, so I got to see a little bit about her bandolier. What do you call those? She's got all her bullets. She's ready to go.
Oh, now, so what is the character that Ford put into her, that Robert put into her? Wyatt. Mm-hmm. It seems like she's much more Wyatt now than Dolores, which is, I don't know, that's kind of disappointing to me. Like, one of the things that I appreciated about her was the fact that she was one of the only good characters.
Yeah, and that's again one of those things that I've had a hard time like attaching to the characters, apart from just I'm not even really attaching to Anthony Hopkins and Ed Harris's characters as much as just them as the actors. I think probably the only character that I've really invested in is Maeve, Thandie Newton. Because she's had the most consistent personality. I mean, in terms of her awakening and personality, she's been the most consistent and the most human-like. Whereas with Dolores and the whole thing with Wyatt and everything, and the fact that they'll get their minds wiped, and it's just I've had a hard time really investing in a lot of the other characters.
Yeah, I almost kind of wonder now that you mentioned that if maybe Anthony Hopkins' real play is not Dolores, it's actually Thandie Newton's character. Because if you think about what her decision really is, it is the more human of the decisions. Dolores is actually, in a way, kind of choosing to be Wyatt. Like, she's still choosing another program. You know, she's just choosing to be the, you know, typical revolutionary, whereas Maeve is doing something more than just killing. She's actually, you know, and she saves that one dude's life. She's like, you know, you don't make a good human, and I mean that as a compliment. So she's not just indiscriminate in her killing. One of the things I did like about that final episode 2 in season 1 is that the whole these violent delights have violent ends, and how we really have, you know, everyone wants to blame violence on video games these days. Oh, look at all these people killing people in Grand Theft Auto and blah blah blah. It's like, yeah, we've been doing this for like 200 years. I mean, go back and watch operas. Hello. I mean, go watch movies. Hello. We've had these violent delights for quite some time now, and so I think it should be more of a commentary to warn us that you know, if we're not careful, we will be very soon getting into sex bot territory and.
But we're there.
AI. Yeah, we are there. I mean, it's already happening with VR territory.
Well, we're not there.
We're not there.
No, we're not there. But I mean, the technology is there, and
I mean, yeah, we're not.
Although I do have
other people are
right?
Getting pretty close.
Doug.
What?
let's not tarnish our memory of Doug here. Although, actually, you know what? If this ever becomes a real thing, there would be like an anime version of Westworld, like animated characters. That would be like one of the first things, I'm sure.
Right.
What? Why?
Just because there's a whole thing for like animated characters out there on the
I know what you mean. Yeah.
It'll be hentai Westworld VR.
Yeah,
with your sex bot.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's gonna. I mean, so these violent delights are gonna have violent ends in the show, but I think it's kind of a warning that you know. I don't agree with the whole notion that, oh, you know, you play a violent video game, but at the same time, there is I don't know, it reveals a trajectory, I guess. And, you know, I'm not a big believer in the slippery slope, but I think at a certain point we do have to ask the question, like I find myself cussing at a computer far more than I would cuss at a human being. And I think that is a reflection of my character, you know, that I'm willing to cuss a tool out. You know, if you see the way, you know, like if a guy in the West would cuss his horse out, you know, there's something, it's a reflection of that person's soul in a way. And so I think that there is a warning there for us that, you know, because if you're willing to do it to an inanimate object, how long before you're ready to do it to a human being?
Well, and I mean, there's a great line from Game of Thrones that this is more relevant to what you were saying a minute or so ago. But Jorah Mormont has a kind of going back to the thing about video games and violence and things like that. Jorah Mormont has a line in season 3 of Game of Thrones where he says that there's a beast in every man and it stirs when you put a sword in his hand. And I always thought that was one of the a great line from Game of Thrones. But, you know, I think there is something to, you know, I think, you know, video games can kind of augment what's there. Like they don't create that, but they can augment it. And I've always felt like this was something in terms of, you know, humankind's view of our nature, that this was something that really secular people and religious people, this is one thing that people should be able to agree on, even if they think that the origin is for different reasons, where, you know, Christians especially, or a lot of people of faith would say that we have a sinful nature. And so, you know, we're going to be, you know, prone to violence, whatever, because of the sinful nature. If you're not spiritual, if you think we developed purely from an evolutionary standpoint, then you would have to agree that just going back thousands of years, maybe millions of years, that this is just something hardwired into our brains from caveman days of one group having to take over the other. And then that's how, you know, Homo sapiens eventually rose to power. So, you know, I think there's probably still like fighting on that point to a certain extent, where you have some people who think that we're a blank slate, or, you know, and that hate isn't, that hate has to be taught or violence has to be taught. But I've always felt like both groups should be able to agree for different reasons that it's just part of our makeup.
Right. You know, and I've heard people, you know, like do the devil made me do it thing, like that a lot of religious people are guilty of that sort of thing, like pawning it off on the devil. But, you know, I think that's equal and opposite in you know, a lot of parts of culture today, that where people will say that about, you know, it's video games, violent video games are bringing this out in people, or people's poverty, or the media, you know, like people's poverty makes them do bad things. It's like, you know, this stuff is lurking. It's latent. You know, okay, if you want to go back to a religious story, God talking to Cain. I mean, God doesn't talk to very many people in the Judeo-Christian versions of the Bible, but he talks to Cain and says, sin is crouching at your door, but you must master it. And I think that's a pretty good metaphor. That's a pretty good metaphor, that it's there. It's, you know, just waiting there in the back of your mind, but you can't blame the sin, and you can't blame the whatever. I mean, you can, but I mean, technology is going to continue moving, and society is going to continue moving. Are we going to blame Westworld for it, or is it just a reflection of our, you know, our instincts?
I actually thought that the phrase went deeper, because I thought a lot about, like, why would that trigger certain things? These violent, what is it? These violent pleasures have violent ends.
These violent delights. These violent delights have violent ends.
Yeah. So I don't think. Maybe I'm going too deep here, but I don't think the writers intend you to think violence in terms of like shooting people violence. I think the violence here is actually deeper. The violence of forcing people, you know, the violence of making things do your bidding.
Right.
And so the violence is the humans on the you know, on the androids, no matter whether it's killing them, having sex with them, or whatever. They're the violence of controlling them in an inhuman way.
Right, definitely.
And so these violent, so it's interesting that I love that phrase then, because then it's like the last season really shows that. I mean, the last episode, because their violent delights became their violent end.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And they show one, which I didn't really notice the first time I watched it, but they're shooting the glass off the head of one of the hosts, the guy with the big mustache. And this one lady just takes the pistol and shoots him right in the chest, and he falls over, and she laughs. It's like they're in their cocktail dresses, and she just shoots this dude dead. And they're like, ha ha ha. And then, so, I think they let that happen, let that be there, just to remind you just how flippant this is being treated, and
well, you think about just a quick point, not to derail you, but you think about like in video games,
yep,
like people will just like start shooting non-player characters that are your buddies, or like in Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild.
Yeah, I do it all the time.
You can actually there's a fairy fountain where you can get your horse resurrected if something happens to it.
Right.
But the little horse god tells you, like, basically says, like, look, if you intentionally kill him, I'm not going to bring him back for you. So people would do that, like, because we do that in video games. And if there was an actual Westworld, people would do that exact same thing.
Right. Yeah. And I've done that. I do that with the little Koroks. I'll drop the rock on his head and he'll make a noise.
Well, and it goes to your point, Jared.
It's not a good look. I do it right in front of the kids here. I'm guilty.
Well, but that's the beauty of the show, and it's so realistic. To your point, Jared, about like it needs to have some of this nudity, and so it has to have it because it does it so carefully and so realistically that you start thinking, it forces you to think, like, what if I was in this situation? Like, right. This is a real place. What if I ever go there type feeling,
Right.
Like, I don't think I was ever pulled out of the movie by, oh, this is fake.
Mm-hmm.
Except for the William Black Hat guy. That was the only thing that really jarred me a little bit. Everything else just connected and just felt so real.
Right.
With it, something so, I mean, that to me, that's good sci-fi. Something so out there, something so crazy,
Mm-hmm.
And not the thing is, for me, it's not the androids. I can totally picture androids, but the idea of like the androids taking over. I don't know. There was something about it. The timeline switch. When I say it, it doesn't seem so unbelievable, but the way they portrayed it, it just felt so I don't know, it just huge in scale.
Yeah. Well, and to your point about the younger version of William, the younger version of Man in Black, like that could almost be, I mean, we've seen sort of a real life version of that with Breaking Bad, in a way, where we see the good character go bad. And so I think that could be more interesting in and of itself, and we'll see what they actually end up doing with it. But kind of seeing how this place was what turned him from seemingly a pretty decent guy into this hardened, grizzled old man. There's a lot of stuff that I think you could unpack there with that storyline. I don't know where they're going to go with it, but
apparently they're going to unpack it, because the boy comes back to him and says, the game begins where you end, ends where you began, and what does it say? Begins where you began and ends where you ended, or something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
And so basically, I think the game is like recapturing his goodness.
Yeah, could be.
So where he began in the world was, that scene where he kills all those people, and he's just, you see the change in William,
right?
And maybe where he ends, or whatever the ending beginning thing is. Particulars are not my forte. So I can't tell if he's probably gonna be like sort of more of a hero, more of a helper than, of course, I don't know what side is good or bad. Obviously the company is bad, right? What's the company's name? Dallas?
Yeah, I think
it's Dose.
something like that. Yeah.
That company is obviously terrible,
Right.
but he's the CEO. So it's kind of it's hard to tell where he's going to fit into the story going forward.
Right. Right. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Have you seen the previews for the next episode?
You know, I don't know if I might have actually shut it off. I might have actually forgotten to look at the previews for the next episode.
They show Dolores in the real world.
Oh, I did not see
They
that.
show more of William.
Okay.
So I don't know where, like, this just little tiny clips.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously she's trying to get into the real world. Ford, if you probably, you missed it. In her grand plan is to take over the real world.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay, interesting.
And she said she remembers everything. So somehow she might have been in the real world before.
Yeah, I think that's going to be one of the things that I'm hoping to see something unique and new out of with the AIs, because as we find out like where this is coming from, that they're developing consciousness, because we don't really know. They have kind of alluded to that. And and another thing that we found out within this premiere episode, I don't know, Ford, if you saw that, was that the company was collecting DNA from guests.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay,
you know, it's hard to tell. Like, okay, were they building artificial bodies for people? Were they to transfer their consciousness into? Were they, you know, just using this as like physical models for people, or what? So I'm interested to see what the actual nature of their consciousness is, and if they create something like a neat new twist on that.
it's interesting. I mean, that can, you know, apply to some of the things we're already starting to have to think through, like deep fakes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, now all you need is enough footage of a person and they can be put in any perceivable filmed event. So
although you don't really need that, you can basically just put like a photo with some text on it, and that'll fool people. Like if people, if the media, if anyone really wants to fool people, or that would actually be like the smart model, I think, for the media. Not to get down a rabbit hole here, but like I was joking the other day, like if the media wants people to stop buying into conspiracy theories, like they'll just deliver all news as like a photo with a quote on it. Because people are just that's got to be true.
Well, I mean,
I literally, there's a lady on my Facebook friends list, so hopefully she won't see this. But she's a family friend that she put a meme out there the other day. It's like a George Soros quote that's not a real quote, but it's like I want to destroy America is basically the gist of it. It's longer than that. And so you can very quickly, and it was supposedly in Newsweek back in the late 70s. And someone was immediately like, yeah, here's a link to Snopes. That's fake. And she's like, I don't trust Snopes. And that's become like the new thing, is like, I will accept any meme, any photo with a quote on it, but this Snopes, no, I can't buy into that. Anyway.
Yes, the hieroglyphics. We're going backwards. The thing that caught. Also the other thing. Two things. In the last episode, we see, or no, I think it is actually in the preview for the next episode. You see a lot of Bernards, tons of replicas of Bernards, and in this episode, you also find out that they have multiple parks. You know, where they see they find the tiger,
right?
And they're like, they've never crossed parks before. So that's interesting.
Yeah. I wondered if that was from the Shogun world or from a different park.
I think it's from the Shogun world.
Yeah.
I don't know that. Yeah, it could be just like a totally different, like a Jurassic Park type park.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. We'll see.
We also saw, well, and I, as soon as, even though I didn't see the previews, like as soon as I saw, well, you see a character at the end, like all the all the AIs are like floating in the water,
Mm.
supposedly dead, and it lingers on, it goes in close and lingers on Teddy, which I couldn't even tell watching it. I couldn't even tell that was Teddy. I had to in a review later, I read that, but as soon as I found out that was him, I was like, probably not going to kill him off that way. They probably have multiple versions of each host.
Well, and Bernard actually says, "I killed them all."
Yeah.
So like, I don't know. I love how it introduces mystery. Like again, this series of queries is it's got me hooked. I want to know,
Right.
The thing that made me think of when you see all those Bernards, and I think Ford is what you said about Robert, or bringing back what's his name, is that this whole thing could be a simulation, right? The killing of the real humans might all be. We don't know that they're really human, right?
I think that would be kind of a jumping the shark. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if they're going to go that direction.
Could they do like some Inception, like a Westworld within a Westworld?
It is Nolan.
That's true.
The other Nolan.
Yeah, if it gets that far, then I think they will have lostified the show. I mean, JJ is involved, so let's not count it out.
Oh, he is? I didn't know that.
Yeah, he is.
Well, and we did find out now that they're on an island.
Oh, interesting.
What? I didn't know that. What?
Yeah, like at the beginning, when they're there on the beach and the company comes in, the dialogue's pretty vague, but the I think it's the main company guy, the bad guy that they just introduced, is having a conversation with an Asian military man, and basically they insinuate that this is an island somewhere in the Asia region.
I had no idea. I missed that completely. Oh,
yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, you can go back and watch it, because he has a line about how they something about like their jurisdiction or something like that. So
that brings up something that bothered me, is like, what are the boundaries? Could they keep so obviously if it's an island, they can't just keep walking forever, but this has got to be a huge island, right?
Right.
And then I guess the more I think of it, I had more things that bothered me. How does the timeline work? And maybe this is through the timeline jumping thing, the storytelling. But how does it work when somebody dies? They fix them overnight, and then they come back, and the next, or are people are staying more than one day?
Mm-hmm.
I don't. So I didn't really understand the whole process of like bringing them, fixing them, and bringing them back. It seemed like that was one of those things that they just kind of hung a lantern on and moved on.
Right. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not clear on the timeline of it either.
Because it seemed like Maeve would just come back and everybody would be like, but I know the androids are programmed, but you'd think that like the guests would be like, oh, I thought you died the other day, or I don't know, that it just.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe it's just kind of like going back to the video game thing, where there's certain characters you can kill and then they just respawn. One thing.
I assume that, yeah.
But one thing, I don't know if you remember, that I thought was really interesting was we found out that the company, what the company is there for, they're not there to rescue people. They're there for one particular host, and it's Peter Abernathy, who was Dolores's dad, and he was the one that was having sort of the freak out when he was looking at the photo on the porch back in season 1, and then they replaced him, and he's got that whole scene with Anthony Hopkins in season 1.
That's a great scene. It's probably one of my favorite scenes in the whole first season.
Yeah, that one and Hopkins' monologue at the in the last episode are probably my favorite two scenes in the whole season. But so we find out that they're there for him specifically. So I'm curious to see like what is so special about him.
Yeah, he's got some kind of information in him. And they show the brain. You can take the brain out. I wonder. Somebody raised I saw in the on the internet. Is Bernard in that time? You know, in the time where you see him like where everybody's dead. Is that Bernard's brain in Bernard's body? We don't know. You know what I mean? Like, and I guess that's the problem that you were talking about. Like anybody could be anybody at this point, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's pretty open. I mean, you don't really know enough about. Yeah, we haven't seen the outside world. You know, there was a theory I think back in season 1 that this was on like another planet or you know, which I think that would be getting pretty far out there and jumping the shark maybe. But right now you don't really know. It's almost like it really is almost in some ways like Lost. We know a little bit more because we have seen people from the outside world, but you really just don't know enough to really know all of the rules yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I guess even more surprising than anything for me, and I put it on Facebook, was when finding out Bernard was fake, you know, was a android, because now nobody's safe. I mean, the black-hatted man could be an android. Like I said, everybody could be an android. Hopefully that's not true, but
yeah, we don't know.
We have no idea. We lost you, Ford.
Oh, I'm here. Yeah.
Well, so some final thoughts. Closing out here. What do we take away from this for everyday life?
Yeah, I think we've kind of been talking about what we want to do with season 2 of Reverse Redaction and how we want to make it a little more active and try to maybe create some of our own stuff. I'm interested in the possibilities of websites and just storytelling in maybe smaller ways. And so I think the thing, I guess, I just feel overwhelmed right now. There really is a lot of good TV in the sea of bad TV. You know, we've got Game of Thrones, we've got Westworld. We had Breaking Bad. And, you know, there's a lot of these shows on Netflix that aren't bad. You know, they're time killers. There's, you know, my mom's big into the Expanse, you know, sci-fi show. So, I mean, it just seems like every time you turn around, there's a show there, you know, there's some event, or there's a movie, you know. I've heard good things about Quiet Place. Didn't have time to watch this weekend, but, you know, I got a lot of ideas. I think all three of us are, you know, we're creative people. We want to write stuff. We want to do stuff. And a lot of this is just squeezing out. And I think the time to actually work on something of your own. And it's getting harder and harder to really cut through the noise of the internet at this point, with so many competing voices. And, you know, if you want to start a YouTube channel now, well, you'll be competing with Will Smith and The Rock, you know. You know, 10 years ago, nobody cared, but now people do. And you want to start a Twitch show, well, now you're going to be competing with people playing with Drake. And so it's just a sea of information. And I think at this point, you know, Steve Martin, I've always loved that quote from him. He said, "Be so good they can't ignore you." Well, it's the point now. You have to be the best of the best of the best if you want to not be ignored, because you're not going to be noticed. You know, so I feel like I just don't. If I want to create stuff, I'm going to have to be way more selective with my consumption. And so, like, I'm pretty much choosing to not re-up my HBO membership, because, like, as much as I like that moment from season 1, it's kind of Jared's fear of what could happen with the show. It's like, I think they could totally pull the show off, and for me, it still wouldn't be worth it. I got what I needed from this show, and basically what I needed is to say, I need to wake up from my own dream. I've been living in a ton of dreams, and I could spend the rest of my life watching movies and not make my own. You know, if that means sacrificing 10 years of movies so I can make one movie, like, maybe that for me might be worth it, you know? So, yeah, I think that's kind of where I am. You know, my goal for the year creatively is to make a documentary. and to be able to do it in such a way that I'm able to work other jobs. So and to be able to do it on a budget that I can afford, and to get into the habit of doing that. And documentaries are more feasible than feature films. But I think both me and Jared have a dream to make feature films one day. And so I need to get on trajectory where I could, feasibly do it in my lifetime. And so that's going to require some just reprioritization, I guess. So yeah, I take the lesson I take from Westworld is wake up. You've been listening to a lot of other voices. There's maybe you need to listen to that creative voice in your head that's been talking and realize it's time to get out of this chair and shoot Anthony Hopkins in the head. Figuratively, people. I'm not going to shoot Anthony
Look out,
Hopkins.
Anthony.
He's the man. I would never shoot Anthony Hopkins. But metaphorically, it's like it's time for me to close the door on a lot of my consumption and just
I like that.
Create more, I guess. But I really appreciate the show as far as what they set out to do. I think that they've done a great job. I just I need to start doing my own job, I guess.
What about you, Jared?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a fair amount of good stuff that you can take from it. Part of it with them being as open-ended with it as they have, is it leaves you more room to, kind of interpret the way you want and take different things. One of the things I was going to say was pretty similar to what Ford just said. I guess the other thing would be, as far as I'm going to stick with the show as far as I know. I think one thing that's interesting is, back when movies like Blade Runner or something like that were made, like that concept of the future was so far removed from what we had. Westworld, to me, is not that far removed from where we are right now. I mean, we are very close to that. So I think there's a value in maybe sort of like getting a preview of how things could go wrong with this type of thing, or how things will go wrong, because it really just lays out exactly what's going to happen with people. Not the robot uprising necessarily, but in terms of how it could, immersing yourself in that could create a situation like William's character and the Man in Black. The more you immerse yourself in fantasy, the more realistic the fantasy is that you immerse yourself in,
right,
the harder it gets to then step back out of that when you're in the real world. So I think there's a lot of value in that, not necessarily as much in the robots are going to rise up and take over all of us. They may, but if they do, there probably won't be anything we can do about it. But there is something we can do about ourselves, and kind of that line of, as fantasy gets more realistic, how that changes us in terrible ways.
Interesting.
Yeah, I guess the other thing I think of, we've talked about the accelerationist whole thought process and philosophy and movement, and their basic premise, a lot of them, is the only way to end capitalism and industrialism's hold, technologists hold, is to just push in and let it happen. Let the new cyborg overlords come in and rule. And I kind of just feel like if the Matrix is on the way, we are going to have this final showdown with our creation, basically. And I think we need to be it's just not, I feel a challenge to re-engage with my nerd side that I left behind in high school. I got to calculus and I was like, oh, well, I'm done with this. I'll never have to take it again. But I read an Uber blog post today talking about their neural network and how how they've educated it and stuff like that. And a lot of the math is way over my head, but just there are so many things that the bad guys are going to have good AI. good guys need to be thinking about AI too, and the good ways to use technology. You know, if we just continue to defer, there will eventually be a nuclear option. You know, a nuclear warhead. I mean, that's the next phase, is the drone that can go from door to door and pose as a human being and blow your head off. Like those things are not that, like you said, they're not really that far into the future. And so I think one of the challenges for me when I think about some of this is to challenge my brain, you know, to maybe I'm not going to be able to program any of that stuff, but to be more conversant with it and to quit turning away and think, you know, like, oh, I'll just let the nerds do whatever they do. It's like, maybe I need to be a better nerd. I might not be able to keep up, but I at least need to be more conversant. And because there are good nerds out there, and you want to find those good nerds. You know, you don't want the Joker of nerds to destroy the world with some AI, you know, creation. Yeah, I mean, we're pretty close. The singularity is on the way. It may be sooner than we think. So I think we need to just be more conversant. And again, this kind of comes back to the whole consumption thing. We have all these violent delights at our disposal. Are we going to use them for creative good, you know, for chaotic good? Or are we just going to, you know, get pleasured to death?
Yeah. Well, and that's what I take away is this idea of stakes. You know, William wants stakes, or no, I guess it's the black-hatted man wants stakes so bad. And then he gets him at the end, and, you know, he's delighted, but we'll see. You know, we'll see but how that turns out for him. But it does make me think, you know, in this creative process, what will keep us tethered to reality? And that is stakes, right? Is the finality of our existence, of our lives, you know, and that we can break things. We can't just, you know, like this isn't a video game. Like we can't just recreate it, you know.
Right.
And holding on, like, because that's the one thing the humans had, for better or for worse, over the skin jobs, is that or toasters or whatever you want to call them, is that they had the beauty of what is the word? Finitude?
Yeah, limitation.
Yeah. So I don't know how to apply that particularly, but I think it's important when we are creative to think about that, you know, to think about making something that that we don't just continually work on forever, you know.
Yeah,
it has a beginning and an end, like you know, like a good sentence.
Yeah, and I think you see that with, like, I think that's one of the most difficult things to do, because you see, like, I think one of the reasons George R.R. Martin won't finish Game of Thrones, I mean, this is his life's work, you know, these characters that he's lived with for decades, and, you know, if he finishes that, you know, what have you got? The guy's getting up there in age. He's probably not going to be able to, I mean, he could start a new one, but it's not going to have the same sort of familiarity, and he's, at the rate he goes, he will never finish it. So I think you see, even from great storytellers, that it's really hard to wrap stuff up and close it off.
Yeah, and I think that's, you know, we've kind of mentioned this when we're talking about video games. One of the things I'd like to do is to, you know, see, like, to start off in my web career, I guess you'd say, is, you know, try to use the website I have as a place to tell these really little short stories, you know, maybe like a video game that's like a haiku, you know, just little, it's one screen, you know, and it communicates an idea, because those ideas that have been communicated to me, even in games like they're just little great things. And like, sometimes you can't see the trees for the forest, so to speak, in Breath of the Wild. The game is so big and there's so many things going on, and it's beautiful as a whole, but there are parts that would be great as individual games. Last night I was running along the beach, and Breath of the Wild, it was night. It was, you know, there was a nice moon out, and there are all these seagulls around one of these Boko Goblin on the water camps, and these seagulls are just all in the air, and it was just real clear. You could see them all. I'm like, why are there so many seagulls? What are they doing? And so I jumped up into the air, and I just wanted to see if I could shoot one of the seagulls. I was like, they're just cosmetic. They're not really there. So I shot an arrow, and sure enough, I hit a seagull. And I was like, they took that much time to do this crap. I thought for sure I wasn't going to hit it. I just thought for sure it's a cosmetic seagull, and sure enough, I got 2 drumsticks from it. Like that level of detail. I would love to see that. And so in some ways, it's like I don't want to see these big monumental films and big monumental video games and big monumental Broadway plays or whatever, or symphony. Like I don't want those art forms to die, but those little moments that I think we have all had in video games or in movies where it's just like it's just the turn of phrase. Sometimes you quote something from a movie that wasn't even supposed to be a moment, and we love those little things. Like I think we need to find ways creatively to I almost thought about it tonight. It's like, what if we just got on Twitch one day and we just play characters and we just get feedback from the audience, and it's like it's like an open mic, but we're playing characters. And we just need to be able to experiment with some of these cool tools that we have, internet open mics and stuff like that, because I think there's a lot of talent all over the place, but we've been so conditioned to feeling like unless there's 100,000 people watching, it ain't worth doing, and that's just not true, So yeah, but getting that impetus, getting that inertia is just so hard to go, because I think we've all put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears in projects over the years and be like, jeez.
Right.
Either we get on the other side of it 5 years later, we look back and we're like, man, that was terrible.
Right.
Or we were like, man, it would turn out pretty good, but nobody cares. So it's hard to get that momentum, but we can't give up. I think
a little bit at a time.
Yeah, a little bit at a time.
And even maybe going back and reappropriating some of our own stuff,
Yeah, I think that's a good way to. Yeah, that's true. Plagiarize yourself and say, okay, how can I use that idea again in a better way? I mean, that it worked, but like for me, a lot of my early sketches my first sketch on my Surfing Violinist channel, it's like this 7-minute long short film. It needed to be 2.5, and there's just way too many forward rants in the jokes. It's like, just cut it down. Let's get it down to this nice thing that people can actually stick with. So
yeah. And so this has been a great discussion once again, guys. I hate to bring it to an end, but as we've been saying, all things must come to an end. I said that earlier.
But will these violent conversations have violent ends? Not tonight.
Not tonight. Eventually, we'll invent these punching bags that actually, like, the other person can simulate the feeling of being punched. And so it's like some electrode we can put it up. I don't know. We'll both, but then you'd have this trust mechanism. Like, how do you know the other person put their electrode on?
That's true. Do you know, I used to have these tanks, the remote control tanks that the remote controls would electrocute you when you shot when your tank got shot.
Oh, really?
That was a fun toy, but nobody would ever play it.
Well, go watch, go Google not just you guys, but everybody can go Google like the latest episode of 60 Minutes where there's a segment of, did you see this?
Oh, I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Of this kid at I think it's MIT maybe, where he's got this thing hooked up to where his brain signals, he just thinks what he wants to say, and the vibrations, he doesn't say it, it just somehow translates it into a system where it pops up on the internet the words. And he was able to even order a pizza by thinking it. Like, if I hadn't seen this in 60 Minutes, if this wasn't a real thing, I'd be like, that's not real, that's not possible. He was able to order a pizza by thinking it.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
Which is why I say, like, we're not that far from Westworld.
We're truly not. I mean, in terms of mainstream adoption, we still, there's a lot of hurdles, but I'm surprised at how fast, like, you know, one of the most shocking things to me is the Google self-driving car that has, you know, been mapping Street View. Like that's been on the road for a long time now. Like the fact that they even made it and got it on the road is just amazing, you know. And then now we're getting, I mean, it's happening. Minority Report's just right around the corner. And so, yeah. And Westworld too.
All right. Well, as we draw to an end here, Jared, have you thought of a good closing line or a good adieu?
I still haven't. I'm going to end your season just having had no closing line to offer. If you bring me back for any of season 2, I will have some sort of line. But yeah, I've completely just given up hope on developing one of those.
See, what you don't realize is our guest's closing line is their apology. Inception. I programmed you this. All right, so guys, keep up.
His closing line is always
both of your closing lines are. I know at least Ford's has struggled a little bit because he's altered it, and so
it was me. It's been me the whole time. Ford hasn't struggled with it at all. I don't think.
No,
have you, Ford?
I probably have. Yeah,
I don't know if it's in. I don't know if it's your one. You're right. No, because didn't you have a whole thing about the C's and like changing them, and so then you were like confusing yourself with it.
Yes,
most definitely. No, I mess that up like every 5 seconds.
Right, that's the one. I'm talking
about. I see what you're saying.
You're correct.
All right, guys, we'll get to work. There's a lot to work. There's a lot to work. And, there's a lot. What am I supposed to say for it?
There's a lot to build. Get to work. There's a lot to build. Make your own myth.